Okay, well, thanks for coming today. I'm just going to read a prepared statement and then be happy to take some questions. The Calgary Police Service has laid charges following a 22-month investigation into an alleged organized crime group that was operating in Calgary and is believed to be responsible for trafficking stolen vehicles. In November of 2017, members of an investigative team assigned specifically to address the high number of auto thefts in our city identified an organized crime group that was believed to be involved in the procurement and trafficking of stolen vehicles. It is alleged that members of this group worked together in a sophisticated manner to obtain stolen vehicles from low-level car thieves, re-VIN them, and then sell those vehicles to unsuspecting buyers. Throughout the investigation, police learned that the group was obtaining stolen vehicles through various sources, and in some cases, specifically asked car thieves to steal certain vehicles in exchange for cash, drugs, or perhaps other stolen vehicles. Thieves primarily stole vehicles by targeting those that were left running with the keys inside or vehicles left in unsecured garages. The group then allegedly re-VIN stolen vehicles and created matching fraudulent bills of sale along with registration and insurance documents in an effort to conceal the vehicle's original identity. The group used this fraudulent information to re-register and insure the stolen vehicles before ultimately selling them to buyers in British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Police also learned that these vehicles were used in several other crimes, including fraud, drug trafficking, trafficking in stolen property, break and enter, and thefts. Each year during the month of March, the Calgary Police Service takes part in a month-long crime prevention initiative known as Fraud Prevention Month. Fraud Prevention Month aims to educate citizens about how to recognize, report, and stop fraud, including vehicle fraud. CPS also works to inform people about the available resources for those who have experienced fraud or scam activity. The release is a little bit longer, containing more information about those that were charged, court dates, and other pertinent information, but I won't read that. Happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do you have any tips for people that are maybe buying a used vehicle to know if it is stolen? Is there any avenues they can take to know?
Yeah, I think that probably the number one for us to emphasize today is on the buyer beware front, is the deal that is essentially too good to be true. So, for example, a new or relatively new vehicle being sold secondhand, where a consumer does their due diligence and discovers that that vehicle is being sold at a number of $1,000s below what it should be sold at. So essentially, the carrot that is dangled is the consumer getting a deal. However, the more due diligence that the consumer can demonstrate at that point, because very often the deal really is too good to be true. I think that's probably our number one situation, because the sophistication shown by the criminals here when creating fraudulent documents, of course, they're trying to get around that level of sophistication for consumers, but it's usually the deal that we're trying to emphasize.
And they're usually trying to offload these vehicles fairly quickly. That's why they have such good deals. Is that correct? That's correct.
It's certainly possible. Another element is the vehicle staying within the criminal element. So a vehicle could be stolen by one criminal and could be moved to another criminal and essentially stay within that criminal element in order to be used to commit other crimes.
How new is this type of approach from criminals? Is this something that's been around for decades and decades, or is this kind of a new idea?
I think it's a newer idea with respect to the VIN, which is kind of that personal identity that each vehicle possesses. So we talk a lot about identity theft, and most of consumers might relate that to credit cards, for example, or identity documents like driver's license and passports. But essentially what we're seeing here is is identity theft for vehicles. They are valuable commodities, and it can be treated as such. So traded, sold again, and given that new identity to conceal the criminality.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but this investigation has been a real success. Vehicle theft in the city, though, that doesn't seem to really go down. It seems to kind of go up. So is this are you going to be chasing your tail with how many of these investigations? How much of an impact is this really going to have?
Well, we feel that this particular situation, pardon me, does have a significant impact in the sense that we've charged these individuals with organized crime. It's not common in vehicle theft investigations, and we know that in these kind of investigations where we charge an individual criminal with the individual crime of possession of stolen property or the theft of a vehicle, that the result in court is much more lenient than compared to, say, charging someone with organized crime offenses. So we do feel as though in this case it was worth putting a project team together. It was worth doing an investigation of this length in order to make an impact on auto theft in the city.
Well, this is sophisticated vehicle theft. How much of a dent does this put in on the people who are jumping into running cars at
Yeah, well, what we're seeing is with respect to people taking vehicles that are running in cold weather is there actually is a connection to a group such as this. So what we're speaking of when it comes to organized crime in this case is the instruction on the part of people in this criminal group to then instruct others to commit crime. So it could be that a car thief has a vehicle for sale and would contact this criminal group. It could be that this criminal group is instructing car thieves lower in the totem pole, so to speak, I guess, of the criminal organization to go out and commit a very specific crime to steal a very specific vehicle, for example.
You said could be, so is that kind of something that is that happening?
Yes, absolutely. So we know from doing this investigation that it ties directly to the crime prevention work that we do, particularly in weather such as this. So in cold weather, vehicles left running with the keys inside is the number one way that vehicles are being stolen in Calgary, and we know that vehicles stolen in that manner are connected to this investigation.
Staff Sergeant, were the cars being sold on PGG, Craigslist? What was the method they're using to unload the vehicles?
Well, there's a few different ways. One of the ways is to, of course, keep the vehicle within the criminal organization. So it's not being sold necessarily to consumers. When, however, it is sold to consumers, it could be exactly as you mentioned. It could be secondhand seller sites. But there also could be simple word of mouth within the extension of the criminal organization. The number one way that we feel as though people could identify the vehicles being sold is discount. They're sold at a tremendous discount that really does not add up.
And with regards to the investigation, through the whole process, were you involved with other police agencies, RCP, other district, other city police to sort of track these guys down, or more importantly, keep track of where they were with these vehicles?
Yes, absolutely. So that was throughout the investigation and even at this point. So the matter remains under investigation. We understand that it's conceivable for us to recover vehicles that have moved through this criminal organization still in the future, and those vehicles could be recovered certainly outside of Calgary. So working with other jurisdictions during the investigation, but also moving forward as well.
And just one last question for me. When the vehicles are recovered, I know there's the whole process, you know, of the ident and everything else. Do they eventually get returned to the people that the vehicles were stolen from, if you can identify the paperwork?
Yes and no. Certainly that's possible, and if the throughout this investigation, although we only laid charges after a significant period of time, we did recover vehicles ongoing and throughout the investigation. In general terms, we're in order, but that's not always the case, and it really, a lot of it depends on the state of the vehicle and the value that it continues to hold over time, things like that.
Were you surprised how sophisticated this was, this whole ring, the operation you're doing?
Yes, it speaks to the kind of sophistication that I think we see in other forms of identity theft as well, and why this speaks well to our efforts on the crime prevention side, and particularly in this case, in particular as it relates to fraud. It just, the relationship is not lost on us, even on the idea of leaving a vehicle running. So, so both on the fraud prevention and on sort of the day-to-day crime prevention, they're very much connected because as much as there's sophistication on the part of the criminals, they do need consumer behavior to help them to achieve their goals. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just getting some text from the desk about some specific questions.
Sure.
Were any of the vehicles stolen from auto dealers, specifically from the Glenmore Auto Mall? Can you answer that? I don't know. I know it's kind of specific.
I can't speak to the exact an exact dealership? No. Can I say that vehicles were stolen from dealerships? Absolutely, yes. So really, the two streams here are crimes of opportunity, vehicles left running. So we talk about that regularly, and it certainly absolutely forms a part of this. The other is a concerted effort to target a particular vehicle, and if that particular vehicle happens to be a new vehicle, well, then the target very often is a dealership. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What advice would you give to members of the public and of auto body employees and owners to really help prevent and be more aware of what's going on?
Well, I think within the industry, there's a number of due diligence elements that any dealership or garage would be very familiar with what they can do to ensure that they're not getting into a business transaction with a stolen vehicle. I think just to emphasize something that was said earlier with regards to consumers, without question, the number one thing that we would recommend to consumers is to do due diligence, particularly around the deal being too good to be true. So this criminal organization was trying to operate in such a way that some of those due diligence methods that consumers might use would come across as legit. They would seem very legitimate. But what would not be legitimate is buying a new vehicle $20,000 to $30,000 under market value. And why is that? And sometimes what we're finding, I think, is that the consumers see a deal. Very common for all of us to try and get the best price that we can. But that's probably the number one thing that we'd recommend. Yeah.
Sorry, just throughout this investigation, did you get any tips from the public, people phoning and saying, hey, you know what, I got offered this deal at $20,000 below market value, there's something right? Did you get anything along that line?
It is common. It does happen to us, yes, that people bring it to our attention. I'd like to say that happens more, but the reality is, just speaking to the last question, is that consumers do like to get the best price that they can, right? And then when the rest of the circumstances, even if you're doing the best due diligence that you can through a sophisticated group like this, when the rest of the circumstances appear legitimate, it becomes very challenging for consumers to walk away from that potential deal. Yeah.
What?
Yep.
Say someone does buy a stolen vehicle, what happens to them? Does that vehicle get taken away from them at some point?
Yes, and that's why we like getting this message across, because as with any other stolen property, if investigation leads the police to recover that stolen property later on, we want to return that property to the rightful owner. The rightful owner could be a citizen, could be an insurance company, but regardless, that material is going to get returned. The remedy for that consumer who purchased the stolen vehicle is minimal. It's very difficult for them to just receive that money back. So that's why we're trying to get ahead of to educate consumers as best we can.
On that note, sir, is there a dollar figure you can attach to the loss that this causes everybody, insurance companies, consumers in general, that have to have the cars taken away because it is evidence of a crime?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have a specific dollar number for you, I suppose, but what occurs to me in relation to your question is, of course, the cost that we all bear as consumers in relation to registration fees, insurance fees, the price of vehicles, and so on. This kind of issue and the volume of stolen vehicles and how they're traded and sold, there is a residual back-end impact on consumers, absolutely, and the price that we all ultimately pay. Yeah.
Anything else?
Thank you.